Poor human boy gives food to a homeless alien elder, unaware. He's secretly a millionaire. Jake Turner was 16 years old, and life had not been kind to him since his parents died in a transport accident 3 years ago, and he had been living with his elderly grandmother in a small apartment on the edge of the city, where the buildings were old and the streets were cracked and forgotten by those who had money and power. Every morning before school, Jake would wake up early and help his grandmother with her medicine, because she was too weak to do it herself, and then he would make breakfast with whatever food they had left in the cupboard, which was usually just some bread and synthetic eggs that tasted like cardboard. But it was better than nothing. After school, Jake worked at a small convenience store owned by a grumpy man named Mr. Chen, who paid him barely enough to help with rent and utilities. But Jake never complained because he knew his grandmother needed him, and he would do anything to make sure she was comfortable in her final years. One cold evening in late autumn, Jake was walking home from work with a small bag containing 2 sandwiches he had bought with his tips when he saw someone sitting in the alley between 2 abandoned buildings. And at first he thought it was just another homeless person, which was common in this part of the city. But as he got closer, he realized this person was different. The figure was hunched over and covered in a torn blanket. But what caught Jake's attention were the hands that were visible beneath the fabric, because they were not human hands, but rather they had long, delicate fingers with a slight bluish tint to the skin, and there were only 4 fingers. Instead of 5, Jake stopped, walking, and stared because he had never seen an alien up close before. And while aliens had been living on Earth for nearly 20 years now, after the coalition of worlds had made first contact, they usually stayed in the wealthy districts or in their own designated zones. And they certainly did not end up homeless in places like this. The alien must have sensed Jake staring because the figure looked up, and Jake saw a face that was both beautiful and strange, with large golden eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light and skin that shimmered with an iridescent quality like oil on water. And the alien was clearly female, based on the delicate bone structure and the way her features were arranged. She looked tired and hungry, and there was a sadness in those golden eyes that made Jake's heart ache because he knew what it was like to be alone and struggling. And without thinking, he walked over to her and held out one of the sandwiches. The alien woman stared at the sandwich, and then at Jake with an expression of surprise as if she could not believe someone was offering her food. And for a moment she did not move, but then slowly, she reached out and took the sandwich with trembling fingers. "Thank you," the alien woman said in a voice that was soft and musical with an accent that Jake could not place, and he noticed that she spoke English well, despite the slight difficulty with certain sounds. Jake smiled and sat down on the cold ground next to her, which seemed to surprise her even more because most humans would not willingly sit next to a homeless alien, and he unwrapped his own sandwich and started eating. "What's your name?" Jake asked between bites. "My name is Zara," the alien woman replied as she carefully opened her sandwich and examined the contents before taking a small bite, and her eyes widened slightly as if she had not tasted real food in a very long time. Jake," he said, and they sat in silence for a while as they ate, and Jake noticed that Zara was trying very hard not to eat too quickly, as if she was afraid the food would disappear if she did not savor every bite. After they finished eating, Jake asked Zara how she ended up on the streets, and she told him a story that made his chest tighten with anger and sadness. Zara explained that she had come to Earth as part of a cultural exchange program, where young aliens from different worlds would live with human families to learn about Earth culture, and in return, humans would learn about alien cultures. And it was supposed to be a wonderful opportunity, but the family Zara was assigned to had been cruel. They had treated her like a servant rather than a guest, and made her work long hours cleaning and cooking. And when she tried to complain to the program coordinators, they did not believe her, because the host family was wealthy and respected in the community, and Zara's word meant nothing compared to theirs. Eventually Zara ran away because she could not take the abuse anymore, but without any money or identification she had nowhere to go, and because she was an alien she could not get a job without proper documentation, and the authorities did not care about helping a runaway alien when they had human problems to deal with. Jake listened to her story with growing fury because he hated injustice, and the idea that someone could treat another living being so cruelly made him sick. But he also felt helpless, because what could he do when he was just a poor kid with barely enough money to feed himself and his grandmother? But Jake made a decision right then and there that he would help Zara somehow, even if it was just bringing her food every day after work. And so that is what he did. For the next 2 weeks, Jake would stop by the alley every evening with whatever food he could spare, and sometimes it was just a sandwich or an apple. But other times he managed to save up enough to buy a hot meal from the noodle shop down the street, and Zara was always grateful. They would sit together and talk about their lives, and Jake learned that Zara came from a planet called Valara, where the cities were built into massive trees that grew kilometers high, and the sky was purple instead of blue. And Zara learned about Jake's life and his grandmother and his dreams of someday going to university to study engineering. Even though he knew it would probably never happen, Jake also learned that Zara was not just any alien, but that she came from an important family on her world. Though she did not like to talk about it much, and Jake did not press her because he figured everyone had things they wanted to keep private. One evening when Jake arrived at the alley, he found Zara looking more distressed than usual. And when he asked what was wrong, she told him that she had been feeling sick for the past few days and she was afraid she might have contracted some kind of illness from living on the streets. Jake immediately insisted on taking her to a hospital, but Zara refused because she said hospitals would ask for identification and payment, and she had neither. And Jake knew she was right, but he could not just let her suffer. So Jake did something reckless and brought Zara to his apartment where his grandmother was watching television. And his grandmother looked up in surprise when she saw Jake walk in with a tall, blue-skinned alien woman. But to Jake's relief, his grandmother did not panic. Instead, she stood up slowly and walked over to Zara and looked her up and down with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and then she nodded as if she had made some kind of decision. "Bring her to the guest room," his grandmother said. And Jake blinked in surprise because they did not have a guest room. But then he realized his grandmother meant the tiny storage room that was filled with boxes and old furniture. Jake and his grandmother spent the next hour clearing out the room and setting up a makeshift bed, and then his grandmother made some soup while Jake helped Zara get cleaned up and settled in. Over the next few days, Zara slowly recovered with the help of rest and regular meals, and Jake's grandmother, who had been a nurse before she retired, kept an eye on her and made sure she was healing properly. During this time, Jake and Zara grew even closer, and Jake realized he was developing feelings for her that went beyond friendship, and he thought maybe she felt the same way based on how she looked at him when she thought he was not paying attention. Then, one morning, Jake woke up to find his apartment filled with strange people, wearing expensive suits and carrying official-looking tablets. And for a moment, he thought they were government agents, coming to arrest him for harboring an illegal alien. But then one of the suited figures stepped forward and bowed deeply to Zara, who was standing in the living room looking both embarrassed and resigned. "Your Highness, we have finally found you," the suited figure said, and Jake's jaw dropped because Highness meant royalty. And he looked at Zara with wide eyes. Zara sighed and explained that she was not just from an important family, but that she was actually the daughter of one of the wealthiest and most powerful leaders on Valara. And when she disappeared, her family had launched a massive search across multiple worlds to find her. The cultural exchange program had been her idea, because she wanted to experience life as a normal person without the burden of her title and wealth, but everything had gone wrong when she was placed with that cruel family. Jake felt like the ground had dropped out from beneath him because how could someone like him ever be with someone like her? And he started to back away, but Zara grabbed his hand. The suited figures explained that Zara's family wanted to thank Jake personally for saving their daughter, and they offered him a reward of credits that would be enough to pay for his university education and his grandmother's medical care for the rest of her life, and to buy a proper house in a good neighborhood. Jake was overwhelmed and did not know what to say. But his grandmother, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, told him to accept the offer because it was the right thing to do, and she had always wanted to see him go to university. But the greatest surprise came when Zara refused to leave Earth without Jake, and she told her family representatives that she wanted